My name is Xavier Hendricks. I'm from the south of Johannesburg. I do many things. I'm a podcast host. I have my own podcast show called The Morning Shake with Xavier Hendricks. And of course, I am a public figure on social media where I go live on my Instagram channel on Monday nights and I do something called Purpose. I also run a Purpose merch line, which is what I'm wearing today. And then of course, I am a preacher at a church called Crystal Church, where I'm very, very deeply involved with preaching on a very regular basis, and I'm on staff there at the church. And so, I'm doing a lot of things in the social media space, and of course, in the space as far as church is concerned, very, very active, and of course, in the fashion space. So as an individual, purpose is important to me. Part of the reason I really hammer on this whole concept of purpose is because growing up, first of all, I grew up in a place called Klipspruit West, right here in El Dorado Park. And when we were coming up, my father was the kind of person, he had his own company, his own business. And as he was running his business, he was doing quite well in the business. And so when I got to the age of going to school, I went to school in Klipspruit. And as I was growing up, my father actually was called into full-time ministry. So when he got called into full-time ministry, he had to give up his business, give up the finance, give up everything that comes with running a business, and literally take all the resource and all the funding and everything that God has blessed us with to that point and just throw it into ministry. And so when that happened, I also started changing schools a lot because of the financial situation, I had to move to a different school. And then when things started going well again, my father took me then I ended up going to a private school in the later years of primary school career. But as all that began to happen, it was ministry is everything I knew. In fact, it was all I knew because of my father giving up his business, going into full-time ministry. So when that happened, I saw my parents struggling in ministry. I saw the financial challenges. I saw what it took to run a church and the ups and downs. And to me, it didn't look glamorous at all. And oftentimes people would look at churches or pastors and say, hey, the pastors are rich and they're stealing the church's money and they're doing all those things. But coming from the inside, I can assure you that it's not glamorous at all. It's actually quite challenging. And financially, there's nothing in it for the pastor. In fact, if all else, the pastor takes a lot of his personal finances to make sure that the congregation works and the church works and all those things work. And so growing up in that environment, I saw all these things and I always thought that I don't want to get involved in church because it's a struggle and it's not a nice environment to be in. So I'd rather go into business. Eventually, I then decided, no, I'm going to study business management. And in 2006, I enrolled and I studied business management. I finished school in 2005 and the next year I did business management. I did that for about 2 years and then I think the calling on my life was just different because God was like, okay, you did business management for 2 years and I was frustrated in why I was doing it and it wasn't really working out for me. I then changed courses and I then started studying a degree in the Bachelor's of Theology. And so in around 2008, I started studying theology. And as the theology process went through, in 2010, I was in my final year of theology and actually did something called practical theology. And for that part of the process, I had to study I had an opportunity to study in a different country. So I moved to the USA and I spent 6 months there. And as I was doing my practical theology there, I was getting involved in the ministry over on that side. I was getting involved in the church, meeting new people, engaging people on a different level. And when that began to happen, I actually got into a place in 2010 where I was invited to an event called Battle Cry. And it was in a 20,000 seater arena. It's like a stadium. And in fact, it's a basketball stadium in New York. So when I went to this event, it was different worship leaders. So the Hillsong United was there. There was a guy called Kenton Jones there. It was just different worship leaders and the different preachers were there and they were doing this worship session. And as we began to worship in that space, I had what I call my encounter with God. And I believe that every individual must get to a place where they have an encounter with God because that's where you find your purpose. That's where you discover, oh, this is what God wants me to do. This is actually why I'm on earth. This is why I have the skills set that I have. This is why I can do what I can do. Because perhaps some people may be able to dance, or some people may be able to sing, or some people may be good in accounting, or in being a lawyer or a doctor, whatever it is that your talent or your gift would be. And when you get into that space in your life, you then realize, okay, I know that I'm good at, but what is my purpose? What is the way forward? What am I supposed to do with this talent and this gift that I have? And I believe that once you have that encounter with God, and that's what happened to me in 2010, I had an encounter with God. When I experienced God in my life in that way, I then saw, oh, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I should be doing. I came back to South Africa in 2010. We then started something called the Factory SA, which I headed up and started, and it was inspired by, partially my upbringing, partially my mentorship from my father, and of course what I've just experienced in a stadium in New York, where I saw so many young people, 17,000 young people worshiping and praising and dancing, and there was drama and acting, and all these things were going on. And when that happened in me, God then exposed His purpose to me, and I saw that His purpose for my life. And when that began to happen, we started the Factory 2010. And as you know, when God begins to move in your life, you automatically begin to attract people into your space, and then you begin to help those people achieve their purpose for their lives. And that's what purpose is all about. Purpose is about not only benefiting you as an individual, it then will begin to benefit the people that gets into your space, the people that you come into contact with, because it will exude from you in such a way that people want to be attracted to what you do. And when that happens, people are like, wow, I like what you do, man. I want to get involved. I want to be a part of this. And then you inspire them to experience their purpose for their lives. And because God is using you in the way He's using you, you then become an inspiration for people to discover what they need to do in their lives. And that's what purpose is about. So even in your individual life, you'll see that when you begin to really exercise the truth of what God wants you to be, people will be inspired by your life, and people will be, inspired by the way you do things, your smile, your movements, your action, your walk, and because you understand your purpose. But it's a difficult challenge, and it's a difficult road to walk, and it takes that encounter with God to get to that place. Sometimes it takes low moments. Sometimes the moments are crazy low. Sometimes you want to give up. Sometimes you get to places where sometimes you contemplate suicide. Sometimes you contemplate, what's my way out? What's the next move? I don't know where to go from here. And those are part of that. Those journeys and those low moments is part of your journey. In fact, that assists you and that helps you. And sometimes God will use those low moments in your life to in fact use it and flip it around to show you that, oh, this is why God allowed me to go through those challenges. This is why God brought me up in a home where perhaps I come from a single background, a single parent background. Oh, this is why, this happened to me when I was 12 years old. This happened to me when I was 15 years old. And when you have that encounter with God, you begin to, God reveals it and He opens it up to you, and you start seeing, all these things that happened in my life all come together. And the purpose of those things, some may be negative, some may be positive, some may be high, some may be lows, but the purpose of those things coming together in your life, it all comes together, and it shows you that this is why God has you on the face of the earth. So when you begin to question yourself, I believe everybody gets into this stage in their lives where they start asking difficult questions. Perhaps something goes wrong in your life. Perhaps you lose a loved one. Perhaps you lose your job. Perhaps you fail at school. Something happens that triggers that question in your mind. Okay, why am I here? Okay, what's my purpose? What's the reason I'm on earth? And when you begin to ask yourself that difficult question, and it's a difficult question, and oftentimes it takes a long time to get to a place where you answer that question. And sometimes God takes you through journeys for you to get to that answer. And the tricky thing about God is that to get to that answer, the journey is difficult. To get to your answer of why I am who I am and what my reason and purpose is on this earth, the journey to get there is challenging. So when I personally got to to finish my degree. Well, I didn't finish my degree in bachelor's of what was I doing? I was doing business administration. I didn't finish my degree. I did 2 years, and on my third year, I was like, I don't like this. I'm out. I was in a difficult space in my life. I was in a tough space in my life. I was in a space where I was asking those difficult questions. I was saying, I don't like what I'm doing. I'm unsure about my future. My vision is blurry. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was the kind of person I wanted to get things done, man, because I felt like if I can get things done at a young age, then I can enjoy my life moving forward. If I can understand my purpose early, then I can enjoy. But little did I know that journey of understanding your purpose is going to take you through some tough times. It's going to take you through some lows. It's going to take you through some spots where you got to ask yourself difficult questions, where you got to reckon with God, you got to reckon with yourself. Sometimes you have difficult conversations with loved ones. I got to a place where I was so lost. I started asking my mother, I don't know what. I started asking people, what do you guys think I'm good at? What do you think I should be doing with my life? I started trying to find solutions by asking people. I even got to the place where in my third year of theology, I was like, okay, now I have this degree, so what am I supposed to do with it? Where do I go with it? And then when I started the Factory SA, it really did blow up. I mean, we were looking at 1,000 young people on a weekly basis. Buses were coming in, they're overloaded. We were having big conferences that were attracting 3,000 people. We were doing all these amazing things. Then I'll never forget, in 2016, I got to a place where I came from, and this is something I like to explain because it was a really low place in my life. I came from having all this exposure with the ministry I was in, youth ministry I was in. I mean, exposure like getting invited to speak on a panel on SABC for whatever chat they were having about youth. Exposure like getting invited to speak on YoTV about young people. Exposure like getting invited to speak on channels like One Gospel, and even having the production that I produced and executively produced being aired on a channel like One Gospel. It was a high moment in my life. And then you never guess, after that I had such a bad low moment in my life where all of that came to an end. I wasn't getting invited to speak at conferences anymore. I wasn't getting invited to speak on these TV shows anymore. And when that happened, I did some internal questioning. I asked, am I doing something wrong? Did I say something I shouldn't have said? Did I annoy someone, the wrong person, and now I'm not getting invited? Then I started asking God, did I do something wrong to you? Am I sinning? Show me what I'm doing wrong in my life. Perhaps it's something I'm doing wrong. That's why you're punishing me. Then you start asking God, are you punishing me? Why are things going wrong in my life? And as I went through that season, I went through what I now actually recognize as a season of depression, actually. I went through a good 2-3 years of depression, where I completely went off social media. I stopped posting things on my YouTube channels. I stopped going on to Instagram. And I was in almost like a self kind of pity mode that I couldn't understand why I'm in that space. And I kept asking God, what's the next season of my life? What's my journey like? Where do I go now? And the most difficult thing is coming from that high of, again, being invited to speak at events, being invited to be on television, and then just quiet. And then coming into spaces where people pretend that they don't know you, people look at you weird, and what that does, it messes with your self-esteem, it messes with your confidence. And then later on, I didn't even want to go onto a stage anymore because I used to preach every week. Later on, I was like, nah, let somebody else preach, let this person go, let that person go. And I really started questioning my purpose, and I started questioning who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. And that took me a good 3 years, and it was a dark moment in my life. And in that dark moment is in fact sometimes where God wants us to be, because then in those dark moments He begins to get closer to us, and He begins to ask us difficult questions. And we begin to reckon with ourselves, and we begin to ask ourselves questions like, why am I here? why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I doing it because I want the reward at the end? Or am I doing it because I want God to have the reward at the end? And you begin to just grapple with all these questions, and you begin to grapple with these thoughts, and you begin to grapple with these emotions, and it becomes it's a tough time. But in those tough seasons and in those low moments in your life, you actually get to a place where God gets closer to your life, where God gets closer, where God begins to engage, where God begins to reveal himself to you, where you start saying, wait, what is my first love? Where was I when I first experienced that encounter? And God begins to, because somewhere in the hype and in the excitement and in the energy, I feel like you start drifting away from the original plan God had for your life. And so sometimes God has to pull you back, and oftentimes God can only get your attention when things really get difficult. It's difficult, but it's necessary. It's difficult, but sometimes God needs to pull you back to the original mandate. Sometimes you there's flaws in your life that you're not seeing. Sometimes there's blind spots in your life that you're not seeing. And oftentimes the only way God can get you to begin to see that is to take you through challenging times. But not only to see your weaknesses or your blind spots, but sometimes God has to pull you through those difficult times, like it says in the book of James, where count it all joy when you fall into trials and tribulation, for the testing of your faith shall produce perseverance. And so sometimes God takes you through those tough times, because those are the times that makes you stronger. Those are the times that makes you better. Those are the times that makes you see things in a different light. Those are the times that, because if you think about going to the gym, you can't just go there and watch someone else pick up the weights and then expect you to get muscles. Part of going to the gym is for you to pick up the weights yourself. But the problem is the weights are heavy. The problem is if you have to do a certain number of reps, it's difficult. The problem is you sweating. The problem is your arms are sore, your legs are sore. It's an uncomfortable process. But the thing is, after that uncomfortable process, you then turn back and you start seeing, wow, okay, my biceps are growing. Wow, okay, my legs are growing. Wow, the six-pack is coming into place. Wow, I'm healthier. Wow, I can run further. I can cycle further. But it took those training sessions where nobody saw you, where you were sweating and you were crying and you wanted to give up. It took those sessions in the dark for God to reward you in the light. So when you begin to look at accomplishing your ultimate purpose, it's never a destination. You don't ever get to the place where, okay, I've done what I've done and I'm finished now. In fact, when you're pursuing your purpose, you almost never you're never done. You're always learning something different. You're always meeting new people. You're always striving for the next high, or for the next, okay, where do I go now? Okay, I've done this and I understand this, but I'm sure there should be something more than this. Where do I go next? And you never really get to a place where you finally get to a spot where, okay, I have it all sorted out, I have it all figured out, and things are working out in my favor now, and I'm good, I'm ready to go. You're always trying to build. In fact, that's why you hear people say that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Because the aim of trying to excel and the aim of trying to become a better person is always for you to try and be not be the smartest person in the room. You always want to surround yourself with people that, especially if you are trying to enter into a particular realm or enter into a certain art or whatever it is. So let's make an example. You want to get into the space of drama or music or whatever. You always want to be in a space or in a room where there's people that are more smart, intelligent than you, people that have accomplished more than you. And even if you are in a space where you have achieved a lot of I felt personally, I was in a good spot in my career. I was in a good spot with ministry. I was in a good spot with factory. I was attracting a lot of young people. At some point, it was considered one of the largest youth organizations in South Africa. And I thought, okay, I'm fine and I'm doing well. But I always thought, and then I heard that phrase, you're not supposed to be the smartest person in the room. And what would happen is, oftentimes my father would, for big conferences, he would get people to come from America, like a doctor, different doctors, different pastors, different, evangelists or whatever. And I would always tell my father, you know what, can I fetch them from the airport? And my father would say, no problem. So I take the car and I would pick them up from the airport. But as we're driving back, and I say I'll go drop them at the hotel or wherever they're staying, and as we're driving back, I would introduce myself and I would ask questions and I would engage them and I would just really get into their minds and see how they reason and see how they think. And I never forget, there was one time I fetched one of my dad's friends he was living in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, but he flew to South Africa. And he actually flew, his name is Dr. Frank Thomas, and he flew here with Reverend or Dr. Jeremiah Wright, which is actually Barack Obama's pastor. And so when I found out that he was coming here to South Africa with Dr. Frank, I told my father, I definitely have to fetch them from the airport and take them to the hotel. So I went, we got this Kumbi and we picked them up and we drove them there. And the aim of that is to ask questions. The aim of that is to engage in conversation. The aim of that is to build your intellectual, capacity and your emotional capacity. And so if I had to answer the question, how do you finally get to where you are? I would answer it in such a way that you don't ever get really to where you finally just made it. You're always trying to grow. You're always trying to learn new things. You're always trying to meet new people. You're always trying to, expand your knowledge and expand your ecosystem. And that's part of growth, and that's part of purpose. Because if you want to get better, even if you look at big artists or big celebrities, you'll always see the ones that are trying to better themselves are always trying to meet new people, always trying to travel to new countries, are always trying to experience new cultures, eat new food. Like if you have like someone like Will Smith comes to South Africa, he wants to go to like Soweto, he wants to see Mandela's house, he wants to go and eat a bani chow, he wants to eat like a traditional meal, because they're always trying to expand the experience of life. And that's what life is about. You always want to learn new things, meet new people, and expand your experience. So you have no choice but to trust the process, because the process is going to take you through the journey whether you want to or not. Sometimes circumstances happen outside of your control, and that's the part of the process. Losing your job may be outside of your control. Going through depression may be outside of your control. Losing your mother, your father, a loved one, a family member maybe outside of your control. It's something that happens there's nothing you could have done about it. It happens outside of your control. And that's part of the process. So when we begin to answer the question about how do you trust the process, it's almost a weird question, because you almost have no choice but to trust the process. I would say that while you trust in the process, instead of looking at the process, I like to use a phrase called reframe. Reframe how you see it. Look at it from a different angle. Sometimes I looked at my failure in ministry that happened in 2017, 2018. I looked at it as a failure. I started asking God questions. What am I doing wrong? Why am I not being invited anymore? Why am I not getting exposure anymore? Why are people not interested anymore? And I started looking at it as a failure. And for a year, I went into a strong depression, because I thought, what am I doing wrong? Where am I getting this thing wrong? And then God taught me a concept of reframe it. Reframe the way you see it. Maybe I'm getting ready to put you into a new season. Maybe the season that you were in is now done, and I'm actually getting ready to expand your boundaries and expand your borders and give you more and better and bigger. But I'm going to need you to get ready for this next season. So in this tough season, again, this is the season now where you grow closer to God. This is the season now where you do introspection. This is the season now where you ask yourself difficult questions. And that's part of the process. So while you trust in the process, reframe the way you see it. Don't see it as a negative. Don't see it as, I lost my job, I lost my income, I lost my popularity, I lost my exposure, I lost my influence. See it as, okay, I did lose those things, and it is hurting, and it is so. However, what can I learn from that process? So I would encourage that if you want to trust the process, rather look at it in such a way that, what can I learn out of my downtimes? What can I learn while I'm going through what I'm going through? And when you begin to take the key factors and the key points of what I can learn, and you major on those elements, you start seeing a new flower blossom. You're like, this happened to me, which was a negative circumstance. And actually, the seed, when you put it into the ground, what begins to happen is it breaks open first, which is an uncomfortable process. Number one, it's in the ground. It's in a dark space. Number two, it gets covered. Number three, it breaks open. When we look at the life of David, even in the book of Samuel, where Samuel anoints David, David's in the field. His father doesn't even, he didn't even consider that he could be one of the guys that Samuel was looking for. But then he ended up being the king of Israel. When you look at even Joseph gets thrown into a pit. Joseph gets rejected by his brothers. Joseph gets ridiculed by his brothers. Joseph becomes a slave. Joseph then becomes a prisoner. I mean, this guy goes through so much, negativity. But now in the end, that was all part of the process to make him prime minister. When you look at, even Moses, they want to kill him before he's even born. His mother then puts him in a basket. Pharaoh's daughter picks him up. He then, he leaves the house of Pharaoh. They then want to kill him as well. His own people don't trust him. He goes through all that process, but in the end, he is the one that God identifies to lead his people into the promised land. So what are we saying? We're saying that process, it gets tough and it gets challenging, but in fact, those are the things that you need in order for you to experience your next season in your life. So when you go through tough times, I go through tough times, I try and say, okay, let me not take it in a negative way. Let me not take it in a bad way. Let me see, maybe there's a lesson I'm supposed to be learning. Maybe I can reframe it and learn something out of this thing, and then take it rather in a positive way. Because if you take it in a negative way, you're just going to cry, you're going to go into depression, and it's not going to benefit anyone. But if you reframe it and you say, okay, maybe I can learn something out of this journey, then you might just get something better out of that whole process. So here's the thing. Your talent or your gift could just be, like for me, my talent and my gift, I struggled to find it in the beginning. I didn't know what it was actually. And I realized, okay, I like speaking, I like encouraging, I like motivating people. And that could just be a direction towards my purpose. But unless I actually find ways to execute on my purpose. So I sat there and I thought, okay, I can speak, I like encouraging people. How can I expand on this gift that God has blessed me with? I thought, okay, I have different tools at my disposal. I have YouTube, I have my Instagram channel, I have a platform that God's blessed me with. I need to now use these platforms and these channels to expound on my gift. And once you take the platforms that God has blessed you with, sometimes you don't see the platforms. You may say, yeah, but I don't have money, yeah, but I come from a difficult background, yeah, all these things. And that very well may be true. But sometimes I feel like I can just scratch off and find some sort of purpose or some sort of platform that I can use to just establish myself, or to grow my purpose, or to speak to somebody, to encourage someone, to engage with someone. And so here's the thing. If you never get to a place where you move on your gift or you move on your purpose, you're going to sit there and your life is going to pass you by, and you're going to wonder why things are not working in your favor. But I want to encourage in closing to say that find something that you're good at and find a way to execute on it. If you're going to sit there and wait for better days, nobody's interested in fact, nobody cares about what you do until it works. Then when it works, everyone wants to be a part of it. But in that beginning process, nobody's going to worry. Nobody's going to, maybe just your mother will say, come on, my boy, come on, my girl. You're so good. Just go, keep moving. Maybe the people close to you will say something. But overall, unless you make it work for yourself, then only people start saying, wow, I like how you do this, I like how you do that. And then people start buying into your vision and to your dreams and to your goals and your objectives for your life. And then things start coming together nicely for you. So yeah, trust the process. The process can be challenging, but again, the process needs to be challenging because it's only in the adversity and in the trial and in the challenge and in the exercise that the muscle grows. So process is important. Process is a staple of success. You must trust the process. You must go through the tough times. It makes you stronger, it makes you better, and it teaches you lessons. It's something that a textbook or studying would not have been able to teach you. Only real life and only the process will teach you those lessons. So trust the process.
The responsibility that comes with doing things for the Lord. You guys have, especially you, let me come to you now, with factory. That's a responsibility, you know. It's like running a home cell, it's like running a church. You literally have people who come in and have to hear what you have to say and what God has put on your heart. How did it come about? How did factory come about?
Factory came about, like, I'm a PK, right? My dad runs the...
Oh, you're also a PK? Yeah. Shout out to all the PKs out there. If you don't know what a PK is, pastor's kids, yes.
Yes. So my dad runs the main service, which is the Crystal Church, and then I run the youth ministry. And about, say, 6 years ago...
You're like a P in the making.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, cool, yeah.
So about 6 years ago, there was another pastor running the youth ministry. And I think it got to a point where he also kind of outgrew it and he had to kind of start moving on to new stuff. His age was also starting to count against him. He kind of lost touch about, you know, what the young people are doing and what they're interested in now. And so the time came for a change. And so my father asked me, don't you want to take over the youth ministry? You know, growing up in church, I can play instruments, I can do everything.
I was about to ask you, how many instruments do you play?
Well, I can play, I mainly focus on piano.
Okay, cool.
But I can mess around with the other instruments. I mean, you grow up around these things, it becomes part of it.
You don't have a choice. Do we actually have a choice whether we can sing, play an instrument?
It just comes.
We love you, parents. We're just putting it out there.
It comes naturally. Yeah, and so he said, don't you want to take over the youth ministry? I'm like, let me pray about this. And I was going through a period in my life where I wasn't sure what to do. I went to go study business management because I knew I wanted to be rich and you know that whole thing.
Definitely.
So I studied business management, studied there for 2 years in Midrand at MGI. And I was there and I was like, I don't really like this. I don't want to do this. And I quit after 2 years. I was like, and you know how parents are, you need to get a degree. You need to have something behind your name, you know, that kind of. So it's like, okay, I grew up in church. I know the Bible by heart. Let me do theology. And so I got involved in a theology program that actually our church runs, with another, it's accredited with the Global Institute. And so I got involved in this theology program, ended up finishing my degree in theology. And then there's a period in this process where you could go to America as an exchange student.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, okay, cool, let me go there. So I go to America and we involved in like practical theology, we're doing that kind of thing. And there's this time that comes where people get excited for this youth event that happens once a year. It's called Battle Cry. And so everyone's getting the tickets for this event and I'm like, whoa, what is this? I want to be a part of this. So I go and I buy my ticket. And so the buses pick us up and we go to this event called Battle Cry. And I'm telling you, I walk into, it's like a big stadium where they play basketball. It's like a 20,000 seater stadium. And so I walk into the stadium, there's like 20,000 young people there and they're all chanting the name of Jesus. They're all doing this thing. And I'm like, this is crazy. and Hillsong United is there and Israel Houghton's there and all this is going on. I'm like, wow. And so they do a drama segment. They have a segment with music and I'm like, this is amazing. And this guy, one of my favorite rappers, his name is Canton Jones. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Definitely.
And he comes out and he does this section and he starts doing Awesome God. And I'm standing there worshiping, nobody knows me there. So I'm like, I'm in the ugly crying worship. And I'm like, I don't care who sees me because I'm in a different country, no one knows me. And while I'm worshiping, it's kind of like God opened my brain and he poured all this information into it. And he's like, when you get back home, I want you to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so I'm like, wow, this is crazy, this is amazing. So I got back home, there was the youth group was of 50 kids. I got back home, started implementing. I'm telling you, I got lights, wrapped cellophane around it to make up. Because I saw this thing, I was like, they got colors, and they got all these cool things. I did garden lights, I'm putting cellophane around it, and I've got my projector up there. They got a big screen. I'm like, this is a projector, it should work, So I got my projector up there, I'm doing my thing. I'm like, okay, I need a drama team because I saw them doing drama there. I'm like, okay, and I need singers and I need a band. And we just brought this thing together. I'm telling you, in less than 3 months, there were 800 people from all over Joburg. They were like, whoa, we heard about this thing, bro. We want to come check it out. I was like, yo, come. And the space we were in became too small. And we moved to an empty factory. It was a big factory. It was just empty. And that's where the name comes from, the factory. We set up a stage. We set up 3 big screens. We set up the sound. We set up everything. We got a technical crew to come in. We had a drama team to come in. But honestly, we had to build that thing from scratch. And 5 years later, now we're doing big shows like Sold Out, the one we do every year. We're doing these huge shows now where over 3,500 people come from Cape Town, Durban, Kimberley, Joburg, and they come to see this in a Crystal Church. It's a big 4,000 seat auditorium.